then the music should start playing. But yeah, I have till 9:55, I guess. So got some time. Thanks again. Tammy! Oh no, I just have to wait till 9:55 to start. Yeah. I think I told Alex what to do, but if you need help, Tammy's here if you want. I guess he's fine. Yeah. I'm so excited. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I need that. Give me that Greek prayer or something. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Love you. You did. Yeah. Really test them. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And my presentation is 20 minutes. I think Mr. Eaton said that, but I just wanted to make sure since you said 15. Yeah. I think you can choose between 15 or 20, but the general public chooses 15. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yes. Perfect, perfect. Thank you. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so before we bring our next presenter out, hi everybody. Before we bring our next presenter out, I want to clarify the lunch schedule. So the slide this morning was not correct. So our group, the group from Fuller Hall, has second lunch. So that's from 12:15 to 12:50. We will have a short break between this first session and the second session, but that is not lunchtime. Lunchtime is 12:15 for this group. Okay? Question? No. Yeah. Okay. Hold on.
Alex,
That's okay.
we good on music?
Oh, sorry.
We good on music? Almost. But do I just give you a thumbs up or something? Okay. Perfect. Thanks. All right. So right after she leaves the stage for the announcement, can you just start playing it? Perfect. Thank you.
Do you want the easels like?
Oh, are you? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Basically, the white easel will just go on this side. Both of in the table. I guess if you put the white one kind of more in the middle and then the table kind of in front a little, just so people can see it a little bit better. And then I'll I'll give a cue. I'll just look at you guys and like point my finger, and then you guys can bring it out. And then the colorful one is my final presentation. So then I'll point to you again, so you can bring it out. But you can keep it all on the stage. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so right out.
Okay, we have sorted this out. Thank you for the alert. So, if you are going, this depends on when you are going, where you're going next. So, if you're going to your second session in South Church, Library Fireside, or the Colwell Center, you have first lunch. So it should say that on your schedule. Yeah. If you're going to be here in Fuller or in Brandview or in Morse, you have second lunch. Okay? Is that clear? All right. I'm delighted to bring up Olivia Roth. I think she's got some stuff queued up, some music queued up for our next presenter. Olivia.
Thank you.
I don't want nobody to praise me when I'm gone. I don't want nobody to praise me when I'm gone. Lord, I don't want nobody to praise me when I'm gone. Oh, give me my flowers whilst I yet live, whilst I yet live. The flowers that you give me, I can't waste your beauty. Oh, the flowers that you give me, I can't waste your beauty. Oh.
The importance and preservation of African art, understanding Gee's Bend, Alabama quilting community. Good morning, St. Johnsbury Academy. My name's Olivia Roth, and thank you for coming. I'm excited to present to you my senior capstone project. Before I begin, I should share a little bit about myself and my inspiration for my capstone. From a very young age, I've had the privilege of living in and traveling to many countries. I've been to big cities, remote villages. I spent meaningful time with people from all over and many different cultures and many walks of life. In each new place, I would wander the halls of museums and attend cultural events to learn and feel a greater connection to the place and the people I was visiting. I can lose myself in a grand museum. I spent hours wandering the halls of the British Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Smithsonian. Each new encounter was a precious connection to a new culture, new ideas, and new ways to consider age-old problems. As I considered options for my capstone, I realized that the through line of these past experiences was my great appreciation and love for the link between art and culture and how important I feel it is to understand and preserve both. Before I begin, I feel it is important to ask you all to suspend any preconceived ideas about quilting. Quilting is far from an exclusive pastime of grandmotherly types who exchange gossip while they sew. Quilting is not old-fashioned, although the American art form does date back to the 17th century. Quilting is a textile art that spans the globe. Each country, culture, and the smallest of quilting groups approach their art and quilting their way. Techniques, the message, stories embedded within will vary. A quilt can be dramatic, radical, a protest even. They even help guide the way along the Underground Railroad. A quilt can be precise, or rustic, or disjointed, or silky soft, or cozy. It can hide wartime messages within its folds. It can mark momentous occasions or reach back into time, the fabric holding the scent of someone loved or someone lost. Quilts give clues to distinguish the time period in which they were made, the methods and materials used, and the culture it came from. And perhaps even the artists. Quilts provoke a range of emotions and ideas about history and culture, pain, and beauty, and family. Quilts are made by men and women, people of all ethnicities, the LGBTQ community, activists and artists, and yes, even the grandmotherly types who like to sew. My first encounter with a Johnsbury quilt was in 2021 at the Boston Museum of Fine Art exhibit, The Fabric of a Nation, American Quilt Stories. Featuring 300 quilts representing American quilt artists, the exhibit showcased different aspects of American culture. The quilt entitled Vote by Johnsbury quilter Irene Williams stood out to me. It was entitled Vote, and it was beautiful and inspirational. Bold, red and white and blue colors, stripes, stars, checks, and strips of Vote fabric interconnected in the Johnsbury signature housetop style, which is a unique interpretation of a log cabin style quilt. Pieced together in free-form lines, the Vote quilt has been described as pulsating with rhythm, which it does. To me, the quilt was as transportive as it was useful. The Vote quilt was created in 1975 in the anticipation of our nation's bicentennial as a reminder of the difficult and ongoing struggle for voting rights. The Vote quilt and the story of Johnsbury quilters, their struggles, and their art are the inspiration for my capstone. My interest in art, culture, politics, civil rights, coupled with seeing the Vote quilt, led me to base my capstone research project on Johnsbury quilters and their quilts. My objectives for my research were threefold: learning the history of Johnsbury quilting, experience firsthand the process of quilt making by creating my own quilt in Johnsbury style, meet and interview Johnsbury quilters to understand their history and culture, their quilting process, their struggles and inspiration, learn what the future holds for their unique art form. Throughout this process, I endeavored to create a body of work that offers something new and inspiring to share with the St. Johnsbury Academy community, to honor the talents of Johnsbury quilters and identify ways to support the preservation of their unique art and culture. The people of Johnsbury, Alabama are descendants of 100 enslaved people taken to Johnsbury from North Carolina in 1846 by Mark H. Petway to work on his new cotton plantation in the Black Belt, known for its dark and fertile and ideal for cotton farming. Less than 20 years later, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 marked the end of slavery. Newly free, the peoples of Johnsbury remained on Petway's plantation, working as sharecroppers and tenant farmers. They had no other place to go. Although no longer a cotton plantation, today Johnsbury is still a poor, remote, marginalized community, only accessible by ferry. It has no stores, no gas station, no doctors, no post office. There's a small schoolhouse and a church. Although poor and isolated, the Johnsbury community is rich in their steadfast support for one another and their faith. Descendants of slaves, they have worked the land, advocated for their right to vote and go to school, and despite, or perhaps because of, their isolation and hardship, their quilts reflect their strong spirit and have led them to become a world-renowned quilt artist as they are today. The following historical information was shared with me through a series of interviews with Johnsbury quilters and through my research. Johnsbury quilts were originally made for purely practical purposes. Quilts were hung on wells to keep the wind and rain from coming through cracks of their drafty wood homes. Quilts were made as gifts for a newly married couple or to mourn the loss of a loved one. Quilts were made large to cover many children sharing a bed and small to wrap a newborn baby. Sharp scissors were rare and the fabric was worn, so strips of fabric were torn into regular shaped pieces. Scraps of fabric were salvaged from used bags and rags, worn out work clothes too far gone to patch, passed down from their deceased. Any textile was fair game. Every scrap was dear. Nothing was wasted. The artistic vision comes to the mind and heart of the quilter. No pattern is ever used. A sewing machine was a luxury no one could afford, so fabric scraps were sewn by hand into larger quilt blocks, then cut and resewn again and again until the vision was achieved. As the quilt blocks are pieced together into larger quilt face, children would play under the table at the mother's feet. As the tiniest scraps of fabric fall down from the quilt being made above, this is where the next generation first learns to quilt. Some children love it. These are the children most likely to carry on the Johnsbury legacy. At the end of the day, the quilt would be put up. This is the act of lifting up a quilt by a pulley system to be stored in the rafters so the quilt is out of the way while the family uses the sewing space, small sewing space, for meals and for sleeping. The final assembly of a quilt in Gee's Bend is a community affair. As you can see here, when the quilt blocks are finally ready for an inner lining of corn husks or muslin and backing, friends and neighbors are called to help. They will sit around the quilt, each person making countless tiny, equally spaced stitches that make up for the final stage of the finished blanket. This process is extremely important to its durability as it holds layers of the fabric in place. It is also the most time-consuming and difficult part of the process. The design of these stitches is an art unto itself, as it will be seen overlying the front and the back sides of the quilt. This is the time that the stories are told, songs are sung, and the gossip happens. The current fame sometimes obscure the fact that the life in Gee's Bend has been and continues to be difficult. During the 1930s, the Gee's Bend community organized to avoid eviction by new white landowners. When the federal government granted permission for Gee's Bend residents to stay on the only land they've known since Petway brought them here almost 100 years ago, could finally own their own homes, the Gee's Bend community paved the way for other African American communities around the country facing similar displacement. In 1965, my own quilt instructors recounted their political activist awakening when Martin Luther King Jr. came to Gee's Bend to encourage them to vote. In any effort to prevent the people of Gee's Bend from exercising their right to vote, Alabama law enforcement sank the ferry that connected Gee's Bend to the Alabama mainland, and we're told it was sunk not because they were black, but because they forgot they were black. In response, the Gee's Bend community members sang, marched, were beaten, and arrested alongside Martin Luther King and lived to continue to quilt and protest in solidarity. Today, Gee's Bend quilts are considered one of America's finest expressions of modern art post-slavery. Things they once only dreamed of, the right to vote, a plot of land, a small home, kids in school, a sewing machine, sharp scissors, and fabrics of their choosing, are now attainable. However, there's a downside to the modernity and rise to their fame. Old worries are replaced with new, daunting, and expensive concerns, which are their ongoing fight to control the rights and financial gains from their artistry, and teaching a new generation of Gee's Bend quilters to ensure the preservation of their art and their legacy. Gee's Bend quilters and quilts are prey to unscrupulous art dealers and repeated copyright infringement. For the last 50 years, art dealers and collectors have come into Gee's Bend offering pennies on the dollar for quilts, knowing most of the artists are elderly and poor, until only recently didn't even consider themselves artists. Time, money, and emotional energy that would be better spent on training a new generation of quilters is spent on lawsuits to protect their right to financially benefit from their design. Design companies steal their design for furniture, rugs, fabric. Poor quality imitation quilts are being sold as if they're originals. The Gee's Bend Quilting Collective, managed by one woman, was formed to work on behalf of the entire Gee's Bend quilting community and was tasked with deciding which legal battles to fight over the unauthorized use of their artwork. Money spent for legal fees come from the pockets of the artists themselves. More troubling still is an ever-present worry about how the best to preserve the Gee's Bend quilting methods and artistic vision. Their success and artistic inspiration are intertwined with the place that is Gee's Bend, but younger generations don't stay in Gee's Bend. Drawn to larger towns with modern conveniences and better schools and are not returning after college. There's a palpable sadness as their most acclaimed and experienced quilters, those who sing the old freedom songs and live the old stories, are growing too old to quilt or to teach the next generation. It's a race against time to entice the young people to stay in Gee's Bend and learn the art of quilting. These challenges, securing financial gain from their quilts and preserving their art and culture by teaching the next generation of quilters, will either lead to an incredible next chapter of their story or not. In September, I traveled to Jackson, Mississippi to attend a week-long Gee's Bend quilting retreat hosted by master quilters Marianne Petway and China Petway. The Petway surname is still prevalent amongst the people of Gee's Bend. Here, we should all stop and acknowledge the insidious legacy of slave ownership. Marianne shared with me the bitter reminder of this when she confined China and I are not related in any way that we know of, except our families were given the slave owner's last name. People came from all across America and the world to attend the retreat. Most were highly experienced quilters. A few, like me, were first-time quilters. All were drawn here by our shared interest in Gee's Bend and their artists. Experienced quilters got right to work. They came in with their own sewing machines, fabrics, and a vision. I'll confess that the experienced quilters were intimidating at first, with their confidence, use of quilting, jargon, and the incredible quilts they brought to display. I, however, approached my workstation with both awe and dread. There, I found a huge assortment of sewing supplies and new sewing machine, pre-threaded, thank goodness. Looking out from my workstation, I saw dozens of irons and ironing boards in the aisles. This was no iron I'd ever seen. It sat on the board, heat side down, and automatically raised and lowered when we touched it. In the center of the room, there were giant tubs of fabric spilling onto the floor. The days were organized: 8 a.m. breakfast, prayers and songs. Noon was lunch, prayers and songs. 6 p.m. was dinner, prayers and songs. Every other moment and late into the night, we were at our sewing machines. I think I went outside twice to get fresh air. Quilters are a focused bunch. China and Marianne would work with us individually and speak to the whole group. I knew in advance that Marianne and China would be singing the hymns as we sewed. These were the songs of thanks, of freedom, and perseverance, and living to the fullest. These were the songs sung under the hot Alabama sun in the cotton fields. The songs lifted the spirits, injected life into the workroom. By the end of the week, I had learned these songs and could sing along with them. China said, just pick up 3 pieces of fabric you like and sew them together. Then keep on adding and sewing and adding what you like, and if you don't like how it looks, cut it and start sewing again. Don't be afraid to cut. There was clearly her way of encouraging new quilters like me, but for the experienced quilters at the retreat who are only used to sewing with patterns and precise, they were utterly shocked and confused. The second principle of great importance is, you are free to create and will only not be judged by your choices. The freedom is probably why Gee's Bend quilters are considered among the most important of modern American artists. They have an extraordinary eye for color blending, block that evokes the sense of movement. Their work is often compared to Rothko paintings, which coincidentally is my great uncle. This freedom distinguishes the Gee's Bend style quilting from all others. The second principle of greater importance, the quilt, no matter how it's sewn together, must be constructed well, no open spots or loose threads. Although they are subject to interpretation, a few original Gee's Bend quilt styles have been given a name: the log cabin style, reminiscent of logs crisscrossed on one atop of another; the lazy girl quilt, long and large strips of ripped fabric sewn in stripes. This technique is assumed to be quicker style to produce due to the large size pieces. However, getting it sewn straight and lay flat is challenging. Marianne's favorite and most famous style of quilting is called the 9-patch, created by her mother. This is an example of Marianne's 9-patch design, this one down here. This piece was intended for Vice President Kamala Harris, but Marianne forgot to take it to DC, so she gifted it to me instead. The quilt I crafted in the Gee's Bend style symbolizes what I consider critical to American life and democratic ideals: a diversity of people, respect and kindness and comfort, inspiration and endless opportunities. My quilt reflects my hope that one day my ideal vision of a blended society will become a reality. The array of fabrics I used felt somewhat disjointed initially, but when pieced together created a beautiful, whole, and happy tapestry. I chose the deep, solid purple cotton fabric to represent nobility of enslaved people and their descendants who, for survival, repeatedly turned the other cheek when they were so grievously wronged. The red and white gingham checked fabric represents a table of food and my hope that no one knows hunger. The 2 different styles of flowers were embroidered in Istanbul and represent the beauty of difference and absence of sameness. The bold and cheerful blue, green, and pink angular shapes represent different philosophies people rely on to guide our lives. The sewing of the pieces together represents the many paths we can take in our lifetime and the opportunity in truly democratic society for all of us to choose our path and the ideas we espouse that will ultimately change the course of our own and everyone else's legacy. The hours I spent researching and reading articles and watching videos about Gee's Bend quilts and quilters helped prepare me for interviewing Marianne and China. The interview process was informal and controversial. We chatted while quilting during meals and breaks. Their attention was continually sought by everyone at the retreat. They are proud, professional, and avoid interviews. Still, they made time for me and my many questions, which they answered thoughtfully. Marianne and China are the rock stars and unofficial ambassadors of Geesban quilting community. They're artists, freedom riders, deeply religious and optimistic leaders, and warriors for their community. Their quilts have appeared on the US postage stamps and hang in the Smithsonian American Museum. Marianne is also reminisced about her youth, saying, "I used to go pick cotton, though I didn't like it. It was necessary to make a living. After my parents finished farming, we'd help our neighbors pick their cotton. We all worked together. Can you believe I started working at age 6? As teenagers, China and Marianne were there when Martin Luther King Jr. visited. They became freedom riders and were beaten and jailed for doing so." The quilting culture of Geesban is a testament to their struggle, resilience, and ingenuity, and the intersection of tradition, necessity, and artistic expression. The preservation of Geesban quilting and the control of their artistry are essential for the art form to continue. Geesban quilts serve as a reminder of the importance of preserving and bringing awareness to African American art and culture. By celebrating such traditions, we not only honor our past, but we also lay the groundwork for a more connected, respected, and harmonious society. At the end of my 3-phase research project, I had so much material, it was hard to make choices about what to include into today's presentation. Given more time, I would like to have shared about the intersection between civil rights movement and Geesban. Thanks to my wonderful advisor, I had the opportunity to visit with the curator of Shelburne Farms for a private viewing of their collection and quilts. Comparing and contrasting Geesban quilts to other quilt styles and communities would be fascinating. Ultimately, though, the scope of my Geesban project was so broad and deep that I had to forego comparisons. My decision to attend the retreat and be immersed in the research process was essential of my way of learning. The first few days were difficult. I had no experience with quilting whatsoever. Lucky for me that this case, there was no experience was a blessing. Marianne reminded me that no experience means I am free from quilting, from the rules of quilting, rules and patterns. That's when quilting becomes personal and interesting. I did a lot of staring at, pinning, and repinning fabric, but China's strong voice kept cutting through my fog of my indecision. Just start, pick up the pieces you like, and sew them. Feel free and sing. Praise God for being so blessed, and if you don't like it, cut it out. Of course, praise God, China meant my quilt, but again, her words are actually a great lesson for living life. I'll never forget her beautiful voice and her confidence and her wise words. Frankly, I never expected how much I would grow to love quilting and the incredibly kind, artistic, and inspirational people I met on the retreat. The lessons I've learned and the personal connection I've made while working on my capstone journey have inspired me and deepened my resolve. I'm a better person, more open and appreciative, more comfortable with taking risks, and definitely more joyful. I achieved my goal to experience making a Geesban quilt and understand the history of Geesban. I hope by presenting a meaningful capstone and piqued your interest and that you will all incorporate art and artists into your lives. To do so will lead to a growing as a person, cultivating friendships, and nurturing mutual respect. I'm thankful for the help and advice I received from my teachers and my advisors, my friends, and my family. I hope I've given you new things to think about and have made you proud. And as I move into adulthood, I can clearly see ahead of me a wonderful, fulfilling life of art, learning, and public service. I'll incorporate and celebrate, champion my Black heritage, and for Marianne and China, I'll do all I can to protect and preserve their artistry and legacy to the Geesban quilters. Most of all, I'm proud that I finished my quilt alongside Marianne and China, their hands and my hands together, creating warmth and comfort, passing and receiving knowledge, and creating bond based in mutual respect and hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia. So I cut into our question and answer time a little bit because I wanted to, Olivia had so much beautiful stuff to share. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. Can I ask for questions from the crowd?
Could you provide a more detailed explanation from your visit to Shelburne Farms and the observations you made during your comparative analysis of the quilts?
Yeah, so it was pretty amazing. It's definitely Shelburne Farms exhibits American mainstream quilts, which is a little different from African American post-slave quilts. So the main comparison that was made is that American mainstream quilts is a luxury. So they had stores all over America, pretty famous stores like Jones, all those fabric stores today, that they were able to buy quilts, get kits in order to make those quilts, which was presented in living rooms, bars, whatever in their homes. Well, quilting in Gee's Bend was out of necessity and survival. So they used clothes, whatever they could find, basically. Thanks.
What were the first 3 pieces of fabric that you sewed together on that quilt?
It was actually these right here. So the Istanbul fabric and these picnic fabrics right there. So, yeah. I didn't expect it to end up looking like this, but who knows.
Great job, Olivia. As a consumer, let's say I want to curate my home with something beautiful like this. How do I guard against buying something that is not, I guess, culturally appropriate? Like, how do I guard against not respecting the original creators of this art?
Well, it's hard, and there's pretty much no moral compass in a capitalist society, especially with buying fabric like this. So I would say be mindful, and I hope my presentation kind of enhanced your knowledge on quilts, so you can go and do the research beforehand, before buying quilts, and you can learn a little bit about different patterns from different countries on your way. So.
Other questions? Rosie? No, wait for the mic, Rosie, because the folks on the stream will hear you.
So I'm curious about the fabric. Like when the community started quilting, what was the fabric made out of?
So their fabric was made out of their clothes and whatever they could find. So if they had like a picnic blanket, they would just cut it up and reuse it. And sometimes even if they finished their quilt and they wanted to use the fabric again, they would just tear it up and start again. So it was pretty much clothes.
Olivia, what's the population of Gee's Bend right now?
Right now, it's kind of hard because so many people are leaving, so they haven't done a proper data set, but I think it's about 16,000 now.
16,000.
Yeah.
It's still only accessible by ferry?
Yes, it's only accessible by ferry, so that's why I had to go to Jackson, Mississippi, because the logistics were too hard. So they do it at a retreat instead.
Did you see the younger generation getting involved where you were?
Well, I was actually the youngest there, but there were a few college students, and like I said, the children don't really come back. So it's just left to the retreat people to kind of keep this art form alive. I'll try my best.
So you said there are a lot of further things that you want to study and you want to look at.
Yeah.
As you think about how your work can influence the world, what do you see your particular project? How do you see it affecting the world at large?
Well, from a general scope, I really want to utilize what I learned here into further implementing that into my future political agenda. But more, since previously this summer, I worked on the front lines of our democracy, I learned that we really just need to listen and take time to sit down and really learn a lot about history and people. And that way we can create a more harmonious society and appreciate art, Black art, and move from there. So, thanks.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Please give Olivia a big hand. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try not to see anything,